And thanks for bringing the community together. Anytime I get an opportunity to come and be a part of Pauline's community, I'm always very grateful, and I always get to meet so many interesting people. So for those of you I haven't met, Rob Friday, pleasure to be here. I do have a few copies of our latest book, From Hire to Inspire. I think it's kind of topical right now. When we went out to write that book, we looked at our audience of clients, about 800, and put out the call to say, what makes your boss great? And we invited clients and employees to submit some stories, and we distilled those down into some key principles for what the best bosses do differently, and I'll kind of pepper in a few stories. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Predictive Success and Predictive Index, we're the pioneers of talent optimization. So you're probably saying, what is talent optimization? Well, it's the way we connect business strategy to business results through people. So designing great teams, hiring the right people for the role, having those productive conversations at the interview stage, and then equipping leaders with the tools that they need in order to know how to motivate different people, how to keep them inspired, get them passionate about the mission and the cause. I want to talk about some of the things that we're seeing out there. So we all heard about the Great Resignation, and now we're starting to see some signs of the Great Re-enrollment. There was a McKinsey article that was written back in March that I thought dovetailed nicely into a lot of the themes, and actually I pulled in a few pieces here for the agility concept. Our timeline, we obviously had a lot of unexpected stuff happen when COVID hit, and then that resulted in some challenges around this Great Resignation, and why did that happen? Well, when we think about connecting our people to our strategy, if we're not mindful about the work we're asking people to do, the way that we're approaching them, the way that we're designing teams, a lot of times that creates a people tax, which leads to missing targets, which leads to frustration. So we've got crazy times happening. Strategies changing, the roles changing. Sometimes we have to do more with less. People are stepping into roles where they're having to cover others. The people that we're working with, we're not even in front of them half the time. When I do these talks, a lot of times I'll have people tell me, how many people in this room have worked with someone they've never met face-to-face before? It's almost everyone. It's never in history has that really happened before. So this pressure that we're under magnifies and intensifies disconnects. We're not mindful of the different ways that people work, what their needs are as an individual. As a leader in the company, how I'm engaging the people that work for me, a lot of times we miss the mark. This was part of that study. So looking at the number one reason why people left during the Great Resignation. For those of you at the back that can't see this, it's uncaring leaders. So understanding how do we create a caring environment as a leader in our organization. Other things that were on the top of the list, unsustainable work and performance expectations, lack of career development and growth. And I'm happy to share these slides and actually a link to the article too if anyone wants it. Lack of meaningful work or lack of support for employee health and wellness. These are the things that people care about, and that's why they left. Moving forward, why are people coming back? So when we look at the Great Re-enrollment now, we can actually get some stats on what are people looking for. And this has actually been a common theme, agility, flexibility. Workplace flexibility, number one. Number two, adequate total compensation. Obviously, compensation plays a role, and especially when people realize that, look, if I'm having to do things that maybe I'm not as happy doing, I can probably ask for more money. Sustainable work performance, matching people with the work that they're doing. This became really critical too. People have more options now, so we need to think about how we're engaging them differently from a talent acquisition standpoint. Obviously, compensation plays a role, but some of the other things, advancement, opportunities, training. What are we doing to equip our leaders for the future? So this was actually an interesting stat as well. When we looked at the percentage of workers that are willing to leave organizations for other opportunities, the things that show up at the top of the list are those opportunities to learn, to grow. What's the company doing to invest in their people? People are willing to leave for those opportunities now because if they can get more upskill elsewhere, they can learn new things. So this is kind of where, when I see the dovetailing of some of the work that we do, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about maybe some of the new things that we're seeing out there, how we align talent around data for team management. So when I look at how high-performance teams operate, this is kind of a slide where it goes from chaotic, where we don't think about the different ways that we engage people. If this is you as a leader and you're not thinking about how your team members need to be motivated, we run into some problems. Basic is where I understand my own needs as an individual. proficient is where now I can start to understand myself as well as those people that I work with. And I have a way of adapting my approach in order to meet others where they are. And then this optimized piece is where now I can start to think as a leader, how do I bring the right team together in order to accomplish a mission so that I've got the right people playing the right roles in a data-driven way. And this is something that's really neat that we can start to put some layers of analytics on. So I look at a high-performance team as one that effectively understands and utilizes the different unique abilities and skills of employees in order to create a greater outcome than each person could do on their own. So briefly talking about connecting people with strategy, this is a neat model, understanding how leaders connect all the way down to the mission to be done. So you got yourself, you've got your team, and you've got the work to be done. So when we look at that, who are the people doing the work and what work are we asking them to do? Is it stuff that they're going to be passionate about? We took a look at this when the pandemic hit and studied over 127,000 people and looked at these different teams they were on to understand what made them unique. And we identified these different team configurations that tell us about how teams like to operate. So there's a neat new piece of, I would say, software. If you've heard about different predictive analytics from a hiring standpoint, that's a red ocean space. There's lots of different types of tools out there. You've probably taken one in the past. But when you think about how teams operate, there's not a lot of analytics for teams. So this has been a new piece to help teams come together and understand how to work together. And as HR professionals, I've actually seen a lot of these opportunities for people to take this back to the business and say, I can teach you something new about how a team should work and give the leader some analytics to be able to go and create a more engaging and productive work environment. So looking at a leader, this is the 4-quadrant model. Basically helps people understand where they are. You can look at the team members, understand now what's my team like, get some analytics on that, understand as a group what are our tendencies. So you start to see some strengths, some caution areas for how a team might operate. And by looking at that and having those discussions up front, a lot of times we don't miss the mark when it comes to asking people to do certain types of work. And then we can actually layer in the mission. So what are the objectives? And who's responsible for what? And then when we start having those discussions, it's now, how am I making sure that I'm asking the right people to do the right things? So this has been a really neat discussion. We can look at who's in the room that can do the work. If we're aligned, great. If we've got a gap, we go to start hiring, having some analytics to say, why am I looking for someone specifically like this or with these skill set? Or how do I create the right level of diversity on the team to make sure that we've got the right bases covered? So taking action, you can start to now say, look, if I'm trying to hire someone here or here, where are my gaps? And be able to show that visually so that you're asking the right questions during the interview and you're equipping your leaders to build the right teams. So a couple key takeaways. What are we seeing out there? Well, it's investing in our people. It's making sure that organizations have the right level of flexibility. If you're, as a leader, thinking about how you can create the most caring environment possible, it's understanding people have different sets of needs. That old adage of treat others as you'd like to be treated doesn't always work. Figure out what people need and give them that. Learning meaningful work, meaningful relationships. These are the keys to creating a caring work environment. Investing in training. A lot of times it's a non-monetary retention strategy. So that's something that we've seen a lot of passion about from certain leaders. And then creating the best bots. The frontline leader is really that piece that connects the strategy to the people at the front line. And if that's something that is of interest, I'd be happy to connect. I did bring a few copies of our book. I think David's still here. The author, founder of Predictive Success is over in the corner there. Maybe get a few signed books at the back. So would be happy to connect. If you're interested in trying a PI, you can use the QR code to get access to it. I'm also happy to share the deck and some of the stats that I shared. So Pauline, thank you for inviting me. Pleasure.